The control room was a cathedral of silence, save for the faint hum of machinery and the occasional beep of a monitor. Dr. Evelyn Carter sat at the center of it all, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with the precision of a concert pianist. The glow of the screens cast an ethereal light on her face, highlighting the faint lines of exhaustion etched into her features. She had been awake for nearly 48 hours, poring over data that defied explanation. The South Atlantic Anomaly, a region of space where the Earth's magnetic field dipped perilously close to the planet's surface, had always been a scientific curiosity. But now, it was something more. Something alive. The anomaly had always been a thorn in the side of space agencies. Satellites passing through it would glitch, their systems corrupted by the intense radiation that seeped through the weakened magnetic shield. Astronauts reported strange sensations, tingling skin, fleeting shadows in the corners of their vision, and an overwhelming sense of dread. But these were dismissed as the psychological toll of space travel. Until now. Until the data started telling a different story. Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she stared at the latest readings. The anomaly was expanding, not just in size, but in intensity. The radiation levels were spiking in ways that made no sense, as if the anomaly were feeding on some unseen energy source. And then there were the signals, faint, almost imperceptible pulses of energy that seemed to carry a pattern, a message. Evelyn had spent weeks trying to decode them, but they were unlike anything she had ever encountered. They were not random, they were deliberate. The door to the control room hissed open, breaking her concentration. She turned to see Dr. Raj Patel, her colleague and closest friend, stepping inside. His face was pale, his usually immaculate lab coat wrinkled and stained with coffee. He held a tablet in his hand, his fingers trembling slightly as he approached. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You need to see this." She took the tablet from him, her eyes scanning the data. It was a live feed from the International Space Station, which was currently passing through the anomaly. The readings were off the charts, radiation levels were spiking to unprecedented levels, and the station's systems were failing one by one. But it was the video feed that caught her attention. The camera was pointed at the Earth, but the image was distorted, as if the very fabric of reality were warping. And then she saw it. A faint, shimmering light in the distance, pulsing in time with the signals she had been studying. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," Raj replied, "but it's not natural, and it's getting closer." Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the light grow brighter. It was beautiful and terrifying, a swirling vortex of energy that seemed to defy the laws of physics. And then, without warning, the feed cut out. The screen went black, and the control room was plunged into silence. "Raj?" Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "We need to contact the ISS now." He nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he tried to re-establish the connection. But the comms were dead. The ISS was silent. Evelyn's mind raced. She had always been a woman of science, grounded in facts and logic. But this was something else, something beyond her understanding. And yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of a discovery that would change everything. The lights in the control room flickered, and the hum of the machinery grew louder, almost deafening. Evelyn's monitor flashed, and for a moment she thought the system had rebooted. But then she saw a single line of text, glowing ominously on the screen. "They are here." Her breath caught in her throat. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made her blood run cold. She turned to Raj, but he was already staring at his own monitor, his face ashen. "Evelyn," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "look at this." She leaned over his shoulder, her eyes widening as she saw the data. The anomaly wasn't just expanding, it was evolving. The radiation levels were fluctuating in a pattern that matched the signals they had been receiving. And then there were the new readings, energy signatures that didn't match anything in their database. They were alien, otherworldly. "What the hell is going on?" Raj asked, his voice rising in panic. Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. The anomaly was no longer just a scientific curiosity. It was a gateway, a threshold, and something had crossed over. The lights flickered again, and the hum grew louder, more intense. Evelyn's monitor flashed once more, and the text changed. Prepare. She felt a chill run down her spine. The word was a command, a warning, and then, without warning, the control room was plunged into darkness. The hum of the machinery ceased, and the only sound was the rapid beating of her heart. "Evelyn!" Raj's voice was frantic. "What's happening?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on the monitor, which had flickered back to life. The screen was filled with static, but in the center she could see a shape, a shadowy figure, indistinct but unmistakably humanoid. It was watching her. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The lights came back on and the hum of the machinery returned to normal. But the sense of dread remained. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She turned to Raj, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We need to call a meeting," she said. "Everyone, now." Raj nodded, his face pale but determined. "What are we going to tell them?" Evelyn hesitated, her mind racing. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for certain: the anomaly was no longer just a scientific curiosity. It was a threat, and it was coming. "The truth," she said finally. "We tell them the truth." As they left the control room, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadowy figure on the monitor had been real, and it was just the beginning. The anomaly had awakened, and it was hungry. The Aether 7 drifted silently through the void, a fragile speck of human ingenuity against the infinite blackness of space. Commander Marcus Drake sat in the pilot's seat, his eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of light that dominated the viewport. It was beautiful and terrifying, a maelstrom of energy that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The South Atlantic Anomaly had always been a region of mystery, but this was something else entirely. Something alive. Marcus tightened his grip on the controls, his knuckles white. The crew of the Aether 7 had been tasked with investigating the anomaly's effects on satellite communications, but they had stumbled into something far beyond their mission parameters. The vortex had appeared without warning, a shimmering portal of light that defied all known laws of physics, and now it was pulling them in. "Marcus," Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's astrophysicist, said from behind him. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of fear beneath the surface. "We need to pull back, now." Marcus didn't respond immediately. His training had prepared him for countless scenarios, but this was beyond anything he had ever encountered. The vortex was growing larger, its light intensifying with each passing second, and then there were the signals. Faint, rhythmic pulses of energy that seemed to resonate deep within his chest. They were not random, they were deliberate. A message. "We can't," Marcus said finally, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "We need to know what's on the other side." Elena opened her mouth to protest, but the words died on her lips as the ship's instruments began to go haywire. The navigation system failed, and the lights flickered, plunging the cabin into darkness. For a moment there was only silence, broken by the rapid breathing of the crew, and then the vortex expanded, engulfing the Aether 7 in a blinding light. When the light faded, Marcus found himself staring at a sight that defied comprehension. The Aether 7 was no longer in orbit around Earth. They were in an unfamiliar region of space, surrounded by shimmering structures that seemed to twist and writhe like living things. The stars were different here, their light distorted and alien, and then there was the silence. A deep, oppressive silence that seemed to press down on them like a physical weight. What is this place?" Elena whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the structures in the distance. They were massive, their surfaces reflecting the strange light of this alien realm. And then he saw it. A shadow, moving among the structures. It was humanoid, but its movements were wrong, too fluid, too graceful. It was watching them. "Marcus," Elena said, her voice rising in panic. "We need to get out of here now." Before Marcus could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life. A voice, distorted and alien, echoed through the cabin. "We have been waiting." The words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. They were not spoken in any language he recognized, and yet he understood them perfectly. The voice was cold, emotionless, and yet it carried a weight that made his blood run cold. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his insides. The voice did not respond immediately. Instead, the shadowy figure in the distance began to move closer, its form becoming clearer with each passing second. It was tall, its body covered in a shimmering metallic substance that seemed to shift and change as it moved. Its face was featureless save for two glowing orbs where its eyes should have been. And then it spoke, its voice resonating deep within Marcus's mind. "We are the threshold, and you are not ready." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. The words were a warning, a threat, and yet there was something else beneath the surface, a curiosity, as if the creature were studying them, trying to understand them. "What do you want?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to remain calm. The creature did not respond immediately. Instead, it raised a hand, and the structures around them began to shift, their surfaces rippling like water. And then, without warning, the Aether 7 was enveloped in a blinding light. When the light faded, Marcus found himself staring at a sight that made his blood run cold. They were no longer in the alien realm. They were back in orbit around Earth. But something was wrong. The planet was different. The continents were shifted, the oceans a sickly green, and then there were the lights, countless points of light scattered across the surface, pulsing in time with the signals they had been receiving. What happened?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the planet below, his mind racing. They had crossed a threshold, and now they were seeing the world as it truly was, or perhaps as it would be. The creature's voice echoed through the cabin once more. "This is the future, the inevitable." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The words were a prophecy, a warning. And then, without warning, the creature was gone, and the Aether 7 was plunged into darkness once more. When the lights came back on, Marcus found himself staring at the familiar sight of Earth, whole and unchanged. The vortex was gone, and the signals had ceased. But the sense of dread remained. "Marcus," Elena said, her voice trembling. "What just happened?" Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for certain: the anomaly was no longer just a scientific curiosity, it was a warning, and it was coming. "We need to go back," he said finally, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "We need to tell them what we saw." Elena nodded, her face pale but determined. "And what if they don't believe us?" Marcus hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for certain: the anomaly was no longer just a scientific curiosity, it was a threat, and it was coming. "They'll have to," he said finally, because if they... As the Aether 7 began its journey back to Earth, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The creature had been real, and it was just the beginning. The anomaly had awakened, and it was hungry.